Good afternoon and welcome to the Supplier Development Programme's Helping You Bid Better question and answer panel session with our expert trainers and Ian Calder, Project Manager at Scotland Excel. For those of you who may not know me, I am Gillian Cameron. I am the Programme Manager at the Supplier Development Programme, and I am supported by a small but highly skilled team who provide a significant force in supporting businesses and how to understand the tender process. We at the Supplier Development Programme are here to support you. We work directly with all 32 local authorities, Scottish Government and a range of other public sector organisations who want to engage with micro, small and medium-sized businesses. The aim of the programme is to ensure that SMEs and third sector organisations have access to free tender training and to assist you find, win and keep contracts. We hope you'll be able to do this in the wider public sector, in your local authority area, across Scotland and further afield. And best of all, it's a free service. STB is delighted to have supported the Forth Valley Meet the Buyer event today, giving suppliers an opportunity to hear about the up-and-coming Stirling and Clackmannanshire City deals and the Falkirk Growth deal. And I do hope you've taken the time to enjoy some of the presentations that have been before us. I also hope you've taken the time to go around the virtual exhibition area and connect with procurement colleagues on the 3 council stands and also at Forth Valley College and various other framework providers who are supporting this event today. STP is here to make you make the most of those connections, and you'll probably know that we offer free tender webinar training sessions, and when it's allowed, we hope to resume our face-to-face training soon. We're very keen to ensure that we can support suppliers 24/7, and we have recently launched our e-learning platform, which you can access through our website. And our first module is Quick Quotes, how to understand, how to get involved in them, and what you need to know to get to place one. We very much look forward to hearing your feedback on our new service, and I do hope that you take the time to go on and try it. And we will be creating more e-learning modules as time goes on. So now that you've visited the exhibition today and you've heard the various presentations, I'm sure you have some questions regarding contracting as a whole and the public sector. So on our panel today, not only do we have 2 of our expert trainers, but also Ian Calder. He's a project and account manager at Scotland Excel with over 25 years procurement experience and has responsibility for a number of councils, including those in the Forth Valley area. As part of our panel today, we have all prepared our own top tips for tendering to share with you in this session. STB's team of trainers all have extensive experience in the public sector. Indeed, they've all had to bid to get on our training framework contract, and so are generally delighted to be able to support the programme today. So if you'd like to start typing your questions into our panel using the right-hand part of your screen, nothing is off the table. We're looking to have those questions coming in. We also are running a poll today where you can talk about your confidence and whether the session has encouraged you to bid better. So please don't forget to vote on that too. I'm going to ask our panel to introduce themselves and also to give us their top tip for tendering. So in the first instance, I'm going to invite John Clark to introduce himself.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Clark, and I run a small procurement consultancy called JR Management Limited, which I've been operating since 2008. My top tip would be to be careful what you bid for. The decision to bid or not is a critical one, because bidding can eat up a lot of resources. You should target the right sort of opportunity that fits what you do, how you deliver, and it's within your capability. You should also pay close attention to the quality versus cost ratio in the award criteria, and how that chimes with where you sit in your industry, whether you're high quality or low cost, and then select opportunities accordingly. And while bidders can only insist on a turnover that's twice the annual value of a contract, that itself does represent a very significant expansion, and that could turn stretching yourself into overreaching. So don't aim too high. Okay.
Thank you for that, John. That's great. Owen, please can you introduce yourself and tell us your top tip for tendering?
Yeah, good afternoon, folks. Thanks very much for the opportunity to come along and speak today. My background is a procurement for about 25 years working with public sector organisations, and for the last 10 years working as a supplier, so actually filling out the tender documents and helping other companies, etc., understand the process, put bid plans together. I have to say I probably learned more about procurement when I actually came over to work as a supplier than I did sometimes when I was actually putting the tenders and things out. When you're really at the coal face, you begin to appreciate how difficult and how time-consuming some of these exercises can be. My tip for today, based on some experiences I've seen over the last 10 years, and I know it can be a lot of reading, but please take the time and effort to download all the documents that are attached to these tenders. Could be buyer attachments, could be terms, conditions. As much as you can, download, see if there's any mandatory requirements. John touched on turnover there. There could be turnover insurances, certifications. I've worked with suppliers who've put time and effort into going in for these bids and then found out that actually meet some of the mandatory criteria. So top tip is please download all the documentation, read it, understand the specification. You can use some of the specification in your response. You ask for this, here's how we're going to meet it. So yeah, based on experience, that's the one that I would put up front for me just now.
Thank you, Owen. And finally, I would like to ask Ian to introduce himself and talk about his top tip for tendering.
Thanks, Gillian. Good afternoon, everyone. My experience in procurement is on both sides of the house in respect that working in the past as a buyer, but also working as a supplier and responding to tenders. Majority of which is in the private sector, but more recently in the public sector. But in reality, there's no difference whether you are bidding for work in the private or public sector or responding as a supplier. My top tip is really to answer the question. Now, that might seem a bit glib, but the number of tender responses that you see, that the supplier has tended to go down a different track to the exam question that the buyer has asked, is very often the case. And not only does it not clearly give the buyer a view of what your capabilities are, but also turns him off in respect that the supplier isn't answering the question. And what does that do in the future? Is that going to be a common theme in a supplier relationship, that the buyer is not going to get what he actually bid for and what he's paying for, and through contract management would prove a problem in the past? So the key for me is listen to or understand what the supplier is saying, complete your response within the guidelines as requested, and last but not least, if you are unsuccessful through the public procurement process in Scotland, you're duty bound to get feedback. You don't, and we see this quite often have to take that feedback, but it's key that you do. If you're serious about bidding in the public sector, accept that feedback when you've received notification that you've been unsuccessful, so that in the future you can apply those learnings to your future tender submissions.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ian. That was great. And thank you to our panel. All great top tips for tendering. Of course, I'd like to add in my own top tip. And I think one of the most important things that I always advise suppliers is to look at Public Contract Scotland and make sure they're registered on there. It's got a wealth of information, and it's just not about looking for contract opportunities. It's about using the information that's in there about who the buyers are. It's about finding out a bit more about their organisations, links to their contract registers, find out who's won a contract, and perhaps there's a supply chain opportunity for you in there as well. So I think it's really important to do that. And one other thing that I came across just yesterday was when we were looking at a contract that had recently been published, that was a framework contract for trades. And what we found was, while it talked about a multidisciplinary trade contract, within the contract there was no description of what those trades actually were. Now, if you're a supplier and you're filling out your supplier profile for your contract alert, normally you would put in keywords. So perhaps if you're a joiner, you would put in the word joinery, or bricklaying, or painting, or decorating. However, these contracts don't have that depth of description on there, and so you could potentially miss out on them being alerted to you. So it's worthwhile considering how buyers are writing the actual notices that go on Public Contract Scotland to find out what keywords they're using. And I do appreciate that perhaps by putting the keyword trade into your profile might return a myriad of results, but I always think it's better to have too many than to miss out on that one all-important one. So that's something else to consider. And just to take that forward, tomorrow the Supplier Development Programme is running one of our free courses, a webinar on using Public Contract Scotland. And so there'll be more hints and tips on that as well as part of that training course, and the opportunity to really find out how you get the best out of Public Contract Scotland. So without further ado, I think we now need to get our panel working, and I'm going to start with the first question that's come in, and it's asked about, can you update your application original details on Scotland Excel at any time? I presume that's one for you, Ian Calder.
So I don't follow the question. Update your details in Scotland Excel?
Well, they're talking about an application. I presume, can you register with Scotland Excel, or is it only in the matter of bidding for their contracts?
It's only in the matter of bidding for contracts, Gillian. You quite rightly said about, you touched on Public Contract Scotland, and the key there is the keywords, the correct coding, so you get pre-alerts. The second point is when we publish our prior information notice and subsequent contract notice through Public Contract Scotland, that's when the supplier would be identified or made aware of us going to market. It's only then that that supplier then becomes known to us when they submit a tender, and the business is then awarded to the supplier if he's successfully meeting all the criteria. So he then becomes a supplier in our contract portfolio.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ian. Does anyone else want to comment on that?
I think
was just going to say,
question was.
Sorry, John, on
you go. Right.
No, I was just going to say, once
related.
Okay, how about Owen goes first?
After you, John. Sorry, Gillian. Yeah, I was just going to say, once we're doing well here between us. I'll just go. Yeah. The wonders of technology. No, what I was going to say, at one time, I think, councils, etc., used to keep kind of approved lists and lists of contractors and things, but obviously these days are long gone now, and there is a duty that everything should be advertised through Public Contract Scotland. So, as Ian says, there shouldn't be any kind of list to update or details to update. Any contract would go through the system and be advertised as per the regulations. So I don't know if that's maybe what the question was thinking back. Sorry, John, on you go now.
Right. I think if the question actually related to your profile on PCS, then obviously you can update that as and when it's necessary. And obviously it is also very important to keep your supplier profile up to date, because that's your key to being invited to quick quotes.
Okay. Right, we'll move on to the next question. If you are a startup and don't have historical financial or contract experience, how do you engender confidence in a buyer that you can meet a requirement in a contract? Perhaps, Owen, do you want to answer that one first?
Yeah, I think in the SPD form, the single procurement document, there is mention that if you can't supply the last 2 years or 3 years accounts, then it might be kind of financial information like a bank reference or a business plan, or something along these lines, some kind of evidence that you are financially viable. So it's not a case that you're automatically ruled out. As John said earlier, that that there are contracts where certain turnover levels will be asked for based on the value of the estimated value of the business, but the council shouldn't automatically rule you out because you don't have that information available. So there might be some kind of evidence that they might pursue that you'll be asked to provide.
Okay, John, would you like to add to that?
Well, I mean, in terms of capability, as a startup, you're relying on your experience gained with other employers or in the past. So it's all about how you tell that story to the buyer as to what your experience and capability has been in the past and how you will apply that to their contract. The whole thing is really about telling a good story.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, another question here about frameworks. We are on several framework contracts, however, we've yet to be awarded any work. Is there a requirement for us to still deliver our stated community benefits, even if we deliver nothing? Ian, would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, I would. I can take that one. Community benefits are a key element. Obviously, have been awarded onto the contract based on the objectives of the Scottish Government and public sector. However, after you submit your commitment to provide community benefits, the requirement to provide them is based on spend. So if you do not receive a purchase order from a council and subsequently the council spends with you, there is no requirement to provide community benefits.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Ian. Anyone else want to make any comments on that?
Straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Next question is, the person who asked the previous question has come back and said, where can I find contact details for the relevant people within the various councils? I think that's something that I could perhaps answer. In that we have, as part of the Supplier Development Programme, all 32 local authorities as members of us, and there is contacts for all of them on our pages. So you can log into the STB website and you can access them. In addition, you can use Public Contract Scotland. You can go to the section where you can search buyers and you can put in the organisation's name and you will find contact details and details regarding their contracts on those pages as well. Is there anything else you would add to that, Owen?
I was going to say most of the notices, Gillian, if you actually get and open up a notice, most of them on the kind of full tab will feature details on who the buyer is for that particular contract. And what you can do is you know, start to build a kind of database of contacts of maybe councils or bodies that you want to deal with, and then you've got a kind of starter at least to maybe introduce yourself or see what contracts and things are out there. So as you said earlier, there's a lot of information sits in PCS that can be very useful rather than just finding a contract itself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I should add.
Sorry, go on, John.
I should add that in terms of the framework agreements operated by the Big Four, the forward plan shows you when those frameworks are coming up for renewal, and in lots of cases has a named contact for the individual frameworks.
That's great, thanks, John. And just to highlight to those on the session today that the forward plan is accessible through Public Contract Scotland in the Information Centre. It's several sets of spreadsheets that have all the framework contracts for the different areas, such as central government, Scotland Excel, NHS and higher education on there. So it's also worth going and having a look at that. I think it's updated once a month. Of course, other areas that you can connect with buyers is through events like this, where we have the Meet the Buyer events, and certainly keep an eye on the STP website. We have lots of different events coming up. We have a Meet the Buyer North in September, which focuses on the more northerly public sector organisations in Scotland. And we work with all the different councils. So there's great opportunities for you to connect with the buyers across those different sectors. Okay, I'm just having a look at what other questions are coming in now. Yes.
Gillian, can I just add just a quick set? I think Falkirk Council run procurement surgeries, do they not, where suppliers can go along and meet some of the buyers as well? I don't know how that's coordinated and organised, but I think that they still run these procurement surgeries every so often. So you can actually meet the buyers kind of face to face there.
They're on the Supplier Development Programme's diary.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question coming in about the NHS, asking if all the NHS contracts are through Public Contract Scotland. I would imagine that they are, unless they're lower value contracts. John, do you maybe want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think there's a number of different areas within NHS that buy through Public Contract Scotland. There's the central services people, plus there's also individual contracts put out by different health boards and different health trusts. But in line with the procurement regulations, they are pretty much all published on Public Contract Scotland, other than quick quotes, and eventually you'll see a contract award notice for most quick quotes appear in there as well.
Thank you for that. That's great, John. Maybe we could talk a bit about quick quotes, because that's usually a very topical question about suppliers wanting to know how they get involved in a quick quote. Owen, would you like to maybe pick up on that?
Yeah, I mean, quick quotes is an interesting one, Gillian, because quick quotes are really used where there is no kind of formal contract or framework or something that's been previously tendered that an organisation can use. So an individual council, if it's a specific requirement, there is no contract framework through Scotland Excel or any of the other bodies that they can use. They then, and it's low value, below 50k really, goods and services, the councils then have to decide how they're going to procure that. And what the buyers can do is go into Public Contract Scotland, search through, you touched on earlier, kind of keywords, search through keywords or kind of postcodes or whatever, and primarily I think a lot of times look for kind of local suppliers if they're available that can meet that need. And again, as John said, if your registration on PCS is not fully up to date, if you haven't done a supplier finder profile, if you haven't put in your keywords, the buyer, if they're looking for suitable suppliers, is not going to find you. So, you know, the lesson is there is to keep that registration, keep these details up to date. And again, you know, if the buyer doesn't know who you are, if you've never made contact with them through an event such as you had this morning, or never written in or gone to a procurement surgery, again, if they don't know who you are, then there's probably less chance of them ever inviting you. So there's a bit of work as a supplier to try and get your name in front of these organisations that you're looking to deal with. And as I say, keep your registration details there. The problem with quick quotes is there's not really a register anywhere of quick quotes that I've ever seen. So what some of the award notices appear in PCS, but not all of them. So it's always been a bit of a mystery as to what are these quick quotes being used for. Is it works? Is it special equipment or services? That's where it's maybe worth asking sometimes if you get the opportunity to speak to buyers. Do you use quick quotes? If so, what for? And who do I speak to or get my name in front of? You won't use them at Scotland Excel, obviously, because it's all the higher value stuff that you do.
Yeah, that's correct. But we do encourage suppliers to register through PCS when you talk to us about it, explain the quick quote process. But you're absolutely right. There's a gap in your availability, you know, the ability to actually understand what they're all about.
Yeah, I think one of the classic uses of quick quotes is probably Fife Council, because they didn't used to use them. About 5 years ago, they were still putting out a full contract notice for a chimney repointing at 1,500 quid. And then they went on to quick quotes, and they've now used the quick quote system quite extensively over the last 5 years for those kind of small jobs. But they really are a good source for small businesses. And most councils have got some kind of formula where they invite 3 or 4 local businesses, 3 or 4 businesses from slightly further afield based on their supplier finder profile. And then the next time they go out for something similar, they will mix that up and use different businesses than they used last time. So there is a chance you will be picked up eventually in your local area if they're doing quick quotes for that sort of stuff.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, John. The next question is around climate change. It's very topical at the moment. We've got COP26 coming up in Glasgow. What should suppliers be thinking about to get ready to put information around climate change and net zero and carbon reduction plans into their tenders? John, would you like to start on that one?
Well, I think first of all, any measures you can take to reduce your carbon footprint are probably also going to reduce your costs. And businesses reducing their costs is a great way to make more profits. So, you know, none of this will be detrimental to how you do your business. And some of it will actually make your business much more efficient. If you're in it, you wouldn't necessarily want to take on the purchase of, say, new electric vehicles if you've got a fleet that's only a couple of years old. So you tie in changes of that nature to when you would be making a change anyway. But you can all look at getting into business with energy brokers to reduce your energy costs, which will, of course, reduce your carbon footprint as well, and how you can save and recycle.
Thank you, John. Owen, would you like to add anything further to that?
Yeah, no, it's actually there's quite a few tenders that are beginning to ask questions about now reducing carbon emissions, reducing energy usage, etc. So, I mean, I think as John says, it's in a supplier's interest to kind of look at what is your energy usage, maybe set some targets for energy reduction, you know, maybe get some additional insulation on your buildings, maybe look at a new boiler or something when you're buying equipment, look at the energy ratings usage on the new equipment that you're buying. As a supplier, you're just trying to show that you're proactive here. You're aware of obviously climate change, and within your business, you're looking at the opportunities across the business to make some reductions here. It's obviously something that you know is going to become more important, more relevant, especially obviously with the big conference in Glasgow coming up this year. So it's going to be at the forefront. There is some help available. We were talking offline earlier about Zero Waste Scotland. So there are a couple of organisations out there do kind of free webinars and tips, which may be well worth having a look at their website, Zero Waste Scotland, just to see some of the ideas that they're promoting for small business.
Thank you, Owen. Ian, what's the push at the moment with Scotland Excel, looking at low carbon and looking at climate change?
In addition to those areas, the biggest focus is the circular economy. I think, you know, the ability, especially when you're buying products, that it's not just about the sales; it's about the disposal at the end of life. You know, it's a lot of the focus is going to be in the short term on our frameworks would be changing our view in terms of carbon emissions, circular economy. You know, that focus area. So as we develop our frameworks primarily on goods as opposed to services, because services don't, you know, you're buying people skills. The focus is on reduction in the future.
Ian, thank you very much for that. We're now beginning to approach the end of our session, so I would just like to say thank you very much to John, Owen and Ian for joining us on this session today, and for you viewers and suppliers who've been watching and interacting with us. STP provides a vital link between suppliers like you and our public sector buyers, and we want to demonstrate very much that the public sector is open and connected. And it's very important for us to have the visibility of these contract opportunities, of the support that's available to you to support you through this process. If you've not already done so, make sure you book onto our free Meet the Buyer North event, which has been held in September, the 7th of September. It's partnered by Scottish Government. And again, a fantastic opportunity for you to get involved and to meet some of the buyers in the north of Scotland and hear about some of the major projects that are happening out there. Our exhibition is open for another hour, so please do take the opportunity to go on and meet with some of the other buyers that are on there and post your questions. Make sure you make your contacts and download the details from their different stands. You can stay connected with STP by following us on Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn, and of course our all-important events diary where you can see our up-and-coming events. I'd just like to say a big thank you again to our panel today and for you to joining us, and I hope we can see you again soon at our next event.